Hello, I am Cody, and today I'll be showing you guys how to wire up your new robot. So, to start out with, make sure you have your robot assembled almost completely except for the electronics. And then also make sure you have all your parts laid out in a nice clean workbench for ease of use. The only tools you should need for this are wire strippers, flush cutters, and a screwdriver. Let's get started. So now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to wire up the motor controllers into positive and negative 12 volts. So to begin with, strip all your wires on your motor controllers, and then get your bus bars out. Make sure you have them pre-installed your bus bar connectors in the back to make sure all of them are positive and ground. So to begin with, just unscrew one of your terminals. I find it easier to fully unscrew it before you begin. And then split the wire in half. And then wrap that around the screw. And then screw it back in. You will need to do this for all 5 motor controllers, both positive and ground, but I will only be showing you positive today. Also, make sure to have as little wire outside of the screw terminal as possible to make sure you don't short it to the ground terminal. Okay, so now after that, we begin wiring up the motors, drivers into the motors themselves. So in your kit, you should find these nice snap terminal blocks. Just unsnap those, find your motor wires, strip those appropriately lengthed, and then put the red, which is a positive, into the white terminal, the white wire on the motor controllers. And then the black with a red stripe on it will go into the ground, or the green. Then proceed to do that for all 5 motor controllers. The 5th motor controller will be used for the arm lifting motor, which I do not have shown here today. Make sure you do the motor side first, and then the motor itself. It just makes it easier to remember which goes where. Now, after that, it's time to wire in the motor controllers into the Arduino. So grab your appropriately lengthed jumper wires, find the motor driver cable with the female header, then put the green side into the ground bus bar. And then take your other side, which should be the yellow wire, and plug that into the appropriate pin on the Arduino. On the schematic, you will find the pinouts for every pin you should need on the Arduino. So for motor driver 1, you will put that into pin number 2. And those are on the left side of the right side of your Arduino, closest to the USB connector. Now, just do this 4 more times. You will find on the schematic, you will find all of the motor drivers labeled with what wheel they go to. Now, after you've connected all of your motor drivers, which is not shown here, it's time to connect the PS2 controller. So, you will find 6 more of these terminal blocks already in your kit. I have pre-wired all of the connections coming from the actual PS2 receiver. You will very simply just cut your connector where you feel fit, and then strip the coating off of it, and take each wire into one of the terminal blocks. Then on the other side, just plug in jumper cables. It is probably best to strip one end to make it easier to get a secure fit. And then follow the instructions in the diagram, but make sure you go by the colors on the actual PS2 side of the connector, not the jumper wires you plugged in. Okay, so to begin with, connect the PS2's power and ground. So the power is the red cable, which on here shown is what I have green plugged into, and plug that into 3.3 volts. This will be on the left side of the Arduino closest to the power jack. And then on the black wire, on the PS2 side, plug that into ground. And then, for the rest of them, follow the schematic to plug them all into the digital pins needed. As an example, the orange pin will go to pin 11 on the Arduino. The schematic is color-coded based on the wires coming out of the receiver. After you have successfully connected all the connections from both the motor drivers and the PS2 controller, you will also need to connect into the servo. The servo has three pins, which the only one we need where we're at now is power and ground. So take the connector from the servo, which will look very similar to the motor driver ones, but will have 3 pins instead of 2. And then plug those into the appropriate pins on the Arduino. Make sure you plug the ground and signal wire into the Arduino and the 5 volts into the 5-volt regulator. After that, we will plug in the 5-volt regulator to the main power bus bars. So grab your jumper wires, which may look different than what I have pictured here. For example, we're just using some cutoffs from earlier. Take the positive from the 12 volt on the voltage regulator and plug that into the positive bus bar. And then route that wire to the positive on your bus bar. And then after that, take the negative and take that to the negative bus bar. After you have done that, we will now plug in the power connector for the Arduino. Now, most people would think this would go to the 5-volt regulator, but it does not, as we're not bypassing the regulator on the Arduino, so we need to provide it with a voltage higher than 5 volts. So we'll be plugging this into the 12-volt bus bars. The black with a red strip will be the negative, and the red with no black will be the positive. Then after you have those wired in, very simply plug it into the actual Arduino. I would recommend cutting these wires to length, but here I just have them shown as full length. Now, we must wire in the power for the camera. You will probably have a much longer wire than this, but this is what I'll be using as an example. So this will be plugged into the negative and positive 5 volts off the 5-volt regulator. The black wire will go to the negative. The red will go to the positive. Now it is time to wire in the connector for the battery and the switch. So take your switch and 3 terminal blocks along with your connector and 2 extra pieces of wire. Begin by plugging the connector into one side. And then plug in the red from the switch into the red from the connector. Then plug the black on the other side of the connector, next to the red from the connector. And then take your 2 extra pieces of wire, one red and one black, and plug the red one into the black lead of the switch. This will be your positive. And then plug the black one into the ground from the battery. Then, very simply, plug these into the bus bar like you did the motor drivers. It does not matter which slot of the bus bars you use, just make sure you can understand what goes where. Now, after you have everything plugged into your bus bars, make sure to get your 2 screws and put those into both of the bus bars on top of each other, ground on bottom, positive on top. And then after you have this unscrewed, after you have it nicely tight, grab one of your covers and put that on top of the positive. And for example, when you have your camera mounted where you want it to, with the included extra wire, very simply just plug that in like that. After that, you have successfully wired your robot. Make sure to double check every connection before you first plug it in. Thank you.